Hello, I'm Linsey, and I'm going to be presenting on my research, partial specifications for program repair. Test suite quality as it impacts automated program repair is a well-studied topic. There have been many papers written focusing on this, and in particular, the impacts it has on repair quality with respect to issues such as overfitting and overly complex repairs. A few ideas looking at getting better repairs include lexicase selection, which looks at different ways of classifying the success of a repair, post-evolution reduction, which is focusing on reducing excess code after a repair to reduce complexity, and looking at manual versus automated test suites, which may have impacts on overfitting. We propose a new idea, using partial specifications for program repair to get simpler repairs. For this, we considered the idea that strong test suites may lead to complex repairs as they constrain the repair search from exploring areas of the potential solutions space. With this in mind, we came up with our idea: remove sets of specification-based test cases, as test cases by specification may help modularize the search space with faults failing only part of the specification in comparison to test cases by code structure. Then we get a pool of these repairs on the limited test suite. These may be overfit, but can then be run against the full test suite to minimize this. Then the simplest repair passing the full test suite can be selected. To test this idea, we removed different sets of test cases and got a repair 15 times each and looked at the number of successful and simple repairs. Here, I have the well-studied triangle classification program with a fault added. The simple repair is just replacing this fault with the original code, while an example of a complex repair may be adding and changing extra code. Here, with the full test suite, there were 15 successful repairs, but none of them were simple. All were complex repairs. But if we remove the scaling test cases, there are still 15 successful repairs, but 8 were simple. So we went from no simple repairs to over half being simple just by removing a set of test cases, with similar results when removing scaling and equilateral test cases. With these results, this demonstrates feasibility in the implementation of our idea, with plans to build a framework for partial specifications as future work.
Hi everyone, so we should be live. As always, we will wait 10-15 seconds to make sure that everyone makes the switch to the Q&A. I'm here with the two authors of the paper. If you have any questions, please ask them in the chat. In the meantime, I will ask one of myself. So your paper is based on the idea that using fewer test cases may lead to simpler repairs. Can you be a little more specific on why do you think these smaller repairs will generalize to the entire test suite?
Can you repeat the last part of that question?
So why do you think having a smaller repair on a reduced test suite will generalize to the entire test suite?
So I think generally our idea is that so a program if a program can be modularized into different parts, then it generally a fault in the program is going to fall into one of those parts. And so if we kind of restrict the test case to just looking at that one specific part, then generally it can generate these simpler repairs. Just in that it gives the program a little bit more freedom in the changes that it can make to the program. It's not so constrained to a very specific area. So.
Yeah, that wasn't, yeah. There is a question in the chat, but that was not a real one. So on the same direction out, can you make sure you do not overfit to smaller test or smaller test cases? Or how do you make sure not to learn on those specific test cases?
Yeah, so overfitting was definitely an issue that we did see happening. But our idea with that is that if we can build a framework that will, it'll get all of these test cases, or it'll get all of these repairs, and some of them might be overfit. But then if we run it against, say, the full test suite after the fact, then we'll be able to sort of eliminate these overfit ones, or at least whatever ones are able to be caught by the full test suite. And then at that point, we'll have, a set of test cases that shouldn't be overfit as far as we can tell.
So there is some question in the chat. One from Eric Fredericks. How did you find lexicase selection in comparison to more traditional selection techniques?
So lexicase, we didn't really do a whole lot of testing with that. It was just something that we've seen in terms of, another way that people are using genetic improvement to kind of get different types of repairs. So that's something that we haven't personally really dealt with a whole lot, but it was something that we took into consideration.
Right. One question from Justina. How would you define the specification for the partial repair? So I guess, how do you choose which subset of the test suite to consider?
So far that's kind of been more of like a random selection. So we just take, so we say we have our test cases and we're splitting them by isosceles, scaling, whatnot. And so we're just saying we're just going to remove a certain set. So we're just going to remove scaling and see if that does anything. So that's kind of been our approach so far. And so I suppose in the future, when we make our framework, we may be looking at ways that we can really narrow down what test cases we want to remove. But so far, it's been more of just removing them and seeing if that generates simpler repairs more often.
One remark from Alexander Berger. Did you compare to, for example, a fail first approaches when you have your subset of the test suite first with the important value first, and then stop evaluating as soon as it fails?
So generally, we just had it running, and then it would find a repair, or sometimes it wouldn't find a repair, depending on what kind of test suite we had. So yeah, sometimes it did fail right away, but generally our approach there was to just see if we were able to get repairs with the test suite that we were using, and then from there, kind of evaluate the types of repairs that we were getting.
So one detailed question from Wesley Weimer. It feels like there should be a relationship between using 75% of the test cases on doing processing later versus using a selection or sub-strategy that doesn't require the full fitness on doing the processing later. Is there an evolutionary computation approach that takes a similar pace but isn't framed as a pre-processing filter?
So that one I'm not sure I know as much about, so I'm not sure if, Myra, you have any input on that one. But
yeah, so I'm just reading Wes's question. Yeah, so I think actually I'm going to answer this by not answering it. So there was a paper by Giovanni and Justina that would just appeared in ICSE where they did a test case selection, and it was a similar thing that they used partial test suites in a sense and they found that they had more efficient repairs. But I think it's a similar kind of a problem where you're using only parts of the test and you're allowing more freedom during the search. And then at the end, you use the full test suite. But I'm not sure if that answered your question, Wes, because I wasn't sure if you're asking about a specific name for a process that's already doing that or not. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure there are other questions.
Yeah, so I definitely think it's this idea that, and somebody else had mentioned constraints in that as well. I think it's this idea of relaxing the constraints and letting the search have more freedom, but then at the end, using your full test, so just using part of them. But I think a key for what Linsey did is that she used tests that are based on higher level specifications rather than just random. So she can say something about that, but I think if you just use random tests, this doesn't work as well. So.
Yeah, and in terms of like the random tests, we did a little bit of running with that, but what we saw was really just that it wasn't really freeing it up enough, or that it's hard to remove these random test cases and then see it generate better repairs, with the idea being that when we're removing just these random tests, instead of specifying where we're removing them, then there's still all of this jumble of test suites or test cases that are still conflicting or still constraining it in ways that aren't really helping.
Hi.